Guests watched a billionaire hit a black CEO. The video changed everything. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. You people never know your place, do you? The words sliced through the gala like glass against velvet. Every head turned. Eleanor Sharp, 60 pearls in power, stood at the center of the museum hall, her voice amplified by outrage and champagne. She faced a tall black woman in a simple black gown. Amara Lewis didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The silence already had. You walk into a charity for billionaires, Eleanor continued, pretending you belong. Who let her in here? A few guests laughed softly, the kind of laughter meant to blend with guilt. The violinist stopped mid-note. The music died, but the tension kept playing. I'm here for the fundraiser, Amara said evenly. Her voice was calm, low too, controlled for the insult she'd just absorbed. But Eleanor wasn't done. Fundraiser, sweetheart, this table costs more than your car. Gasps rippled. Cameras rose. A waiter froze with a tray of glasses trembling in his hands. Amara exhaled, once slow, deliberate, and said, maybe check the donor list before you embarrass yourself further. Eleanor stepped closer, face tight with fury. You think money buys you class? Amara's reply was quiet. No, just entry. The next sound wasn't a word. It was a slap, sharp, echoing, cruel. Phones caught the flash, the marble, the pearls, the disbelief. Amara's cheek turned slightly, but her spine didn't bend. She stood still, anchored, and for a second even Eleanor seemed startled by her own hand. From across the hall, a young woman whispered to her coworker. She didn't hit back. The coworker murmured she doesn't have to. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Amara. Eleanor hissed security. Get her out of my event. The guards began to move slow but certain. Guests shifted, some disgusted, some recording. And right there, under the golden light of a gala built on pretense, Amara Lewis, silent, steady, and unshaken, waited for the world to hear itself. The sound of the slap was still floating in the air when the first phone flash went off. No one was laughing now. Even the string quartet in the corner stood frozen bows mid-air like statues caught mid-guilt. Eleanor Sharp drew herself taller, shaking with the thrill of public righteousness. Escort her out, she barked. Right now, before she causes another scene. Her diamond bracelet shimmered as she pointed like she was conducting an orchestra of humiliation. Two security guards stepped forward, unsure eyes darting between the furious billionaire and the woman who hadn't moved an inch. Amara Lewis stayed perfectly still, her hands relaxed at her sides. The bruise hadn't even had time to bloom. You heard me, Eleanor snapped again. She's trespassing. Amara finally turned her head. Interesting, she said softly. You trespass with your hands and I'm the one accused, the crowd murmured. One guest whispered, she's right. Another whispered, don't say that too loud. The taller guard hesitated. Ma'am, maybe we should Eleanor cut him off. Do your job. That was when a young PR associate, Julia Tran, lifted her phone a little higher. She was trembling, but her voice carried just enough for nearby guests to hear. She didn't touch anyone, Julia said. And you hit her. It's all on camera. Eleanor turned sharply, eyes like knives. You'll delete that video or you'll never work in this city again. Julia swallowed hard. Then I guess I'm unemployed. The room gasped again. Something had cracked. Not glass, not decorum, just fear. The kind that hides behind privilege until someone calls it by name. Amara's voice broke the quiet, low but certain. Security, she said, before you lay a finger on me, check with your director. He reports to me. The shorter guard frowned. What does that mean? It means, Amara answered, you're about to make the most expensive mistake of your career. From the balcony, someone muttered. Who is she? Another guest whispered back. Whoever she is, she's not scared. Eleanor laughed, high, brittle, desperate. Oh, please, you think this little stunt will save you. You don't belong here. Amara met her eyes, calm as marble. Then why does the room keep turning toward me? The question landed heavier than the slap. Even the cameras stopped shaking. Julia whispered almost to herself. They always forget, silence isn't weakness, it's timing. And right then, as the crowd held its breath again, Amara's phone buzzed once in her hand. A single message lit the screen, Protocol V confirmed. She didn't smile. She didn't move. She simply looked at Eleanor and said quietly, "Now it's your turn to listen." The chandeliers above flickered once, just enough to make the gold light tremble. The crowd felt it before they saw it, something shifting, invisible but inevitable. Eleanor Sharp stood at the center of the marble floor, trembling with rage and disbelief. "You think a few cameras make you untouchable?" she hissed. Amara didn't answer. Her calm made Eleanor louder. "I built this city's name on class and exclusivity. People like you." Her voice faltered under the weight of her own words. "People like me," Amara repeated quietly. That echo carried farther than the insult. Guests stared between them, the air thick as smoke. No music, no chatter, just history repeating itself live. A man in a tuxedo near the bar muttered, "She's pushing too far." His wife replied, "No, she's showing us who's been pushed first." Amara's assistant's voice came through her earpiece, barely a whisper. "Ma'am, the board feed is live. They're watching." Amara blinked once. "Then let them see." She took a single step forward. Each heel click echoed like a countdown. The guards still hadn't moved. Neither had Eleanor. But everyone else could feel control slipping out of her hands. Julia held her phone steady, recording through tears she didn't understand yet. "This is wrong," she said softly, "but it feels right to film it." Eleanor finally snapped. "Enough." She grabbed a flute of champagne from the nearest tray and threw it. The glass shattered on the floor between them, gold liquid bleeding across the marble like a confession. Amara didn't even blink. "I've seen men in boardrooms do the same thing," she said, "usually right before they lose everything." From the balcony, someone called out, "Who is she really?" And then from the giant screen behind the podium, the gala slideshow flickered donor names, corporate partners, logos until one name filled the screen. Luma Global Holdings. Under it, primary benefactor CEO Amara Lewis. The gasp that followed was a sound no orchestra could match. Guests turned in unison toward the woman they'd dismissed. Eleanor froze, color draining from her face. "You're lying," she whispered. Amara tilted her head, the faintest smile forming. "No, I'm funding." Phones kept recording. Julia lowered hers slowly, eyes wide. "It's her," she said. "She owns the main sponsor." Security stepped back without a word. Eleanor stumbled, reaching for authority that no longer recognized her. "This is some stunt." You tricked us," Amara's gaze sharpened. "I didn't trick you. I tested you." The crowd murmured a low hum of awakening. And somewhere among the guests, a single slow clap began, hesitant, trembling true. Then another, and another. The hall that once echoed with judgment now filled with applause. But Amara didn't bask in it. She turned to the guards, voice calm again. "Please escort her out. I believe this event no longer requires her presence." The guards nodded. And as Eleanor Sharp was led toward the glass doors, every phone in that hall stayed recording because no one wanted to miss the sound of a century turning. The applause didn't fade all at once. It trembled, unsure of itself, like the room was trying to apologize but didn't know how. Eleanor Sharp's heels cracked against the marble as the guards guided her toward the exit. She struggled, still talking to the air. "You think this changes anything?" she shouted. "This is my foundation, my city, my name." Amara Lewis didn't turn. She just said correction it was. Every lens caught it. The way she didn't need to shout. The way silence bent toward her. On the massive screen behind her, the Luma Global logo brightened again. Then came a new image, a simple contract stamped "Transfer of Ownership Horizon Arts Foundation." The timestamp was that very morning. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Julia whispered, "She owns the foundation." Her coworker answered, stunned. "She bought it before the gala." Amara took the microphone from its stand, her hand, steady voice, low and surgical. "When I invest," she said, "I don't buy buildings. I buy accountability." She looked toward Eleanor, who froze mid-step. "Tonight," Amara continued, "every promise made under this roof will be honored, but not by people who mistake arrogance for class." Eleanor tried to speak, but her voice cracked into silence. One guard gently opened the glass doors behind her. Outside, camera flashes from reporters waiting at the entrance burst like lightning. The world was already watching. Inside, Amara addressed the guests, each face a different shade of guilt and awe. "Some of you knew," she said. "You saw what happened and said nothing. I understand. Fear is expensive, but silence, that costs more." A man near the front swallowed hard. "Miss Lewis, we didn't know who you were." Amara met his eyes. "You weren't supposed to. That's the point." Julia's voice trembled as she asked, "Why come here dressed like that, ma'am? You could have walked in as yourself." Amara gave her the faintest smile. Because power hidden in simplicity exposes truth faster than any speech. The crowd shifted, some in shame, some in admiration. Phones were still recording, but the tone had changed. It wasn't scandal anymore, it was revelation. Amara looked toward the balcony where the musicians still stood, frozen instruments limp in their hands. She raised her chin slightly. "Play something," she said. "Something honest." The violinist hesitated, then lifted her bow. A slow note rose, soft, trembling, human. It filled the hall like forgiveness that hadn't yet found words. Eleanor stood at the doorway, framed by light and defeat. Her pearls no longer looked like wealth. They looked like chains. She turned once more, desperate for the last word. "You humiliated me," she said. Amara's eyes didn't waver. "No, I educated you." The crowd fell silent again, this time willingly, because everyone in that hall understood they had just witnessed more than a confrontation. They had watched an old world end quietly, gracefully, and absolutely. Outside the museum, the night had turned electric. Flashes from cameras burst like heat lightning. Reporters shouted questions that no one dared answer yet. But inside, time had slowed to something quieter, something sacred. Amara Lewis stood beneath the chandelier's fractured glow, her voice steady. "Leave the doors open," she told the guards. "Let the city hear what truth sounds like." The crowd parted instinctively, making room for her to walk. Every step she took echoed clean and certain, as if the marble floor finally recognized its owner. She stopped by the podium, glanced at the broken glass still glimmering near her feet, the champagne Eleanor had thrown minutes earlier. She crouched slightly, picked up one piece between her fingers. "Funny," she murmured. "The things people break to protect their pride." A hush fell over the room. The cameras were still rolling, but it didn't feel like a scandal anymore. It felt like history choosing where to stand. A journalist, emboldened, called from the doorway, "Miss Lewis, will you press charges?" Amara looked up for what she asked. Ignorance, insecurity, that would fill every courtroom in America. A soft wave of laughter rolled through the guests, nervous then genuine. Julia, still holding her phone, wiped her eyes. "You're not even angry," she said quietly. Amara turned to her. "I'm tired. That's different." Her tone softened, but never lost its precision. When you've been underestimated long enough, anger becomes strategy. You stop yelling and start building. That's how we survive, and that's how we win. The violinist began to play again, this time slower, lower, more human. A cellist joined in. The sound filled the hall like breathing. Amara let it settle before speaking again. "Some of you came here tonight to give money," she said. "But real giving starts when you lose something: comfort, control, illusion." Her eyes swept across the faces, some ashamed, some inspired. "I built Luma Global to prove that brilliance has no color code. Tonight we proved something else, neither does dignity." At the edge of the crowd, a young woman whispered, "She's rewriting the story while we watch." Her friend nodded. "No, she's correcting it." Eleanor Sharp's name still hung on the lips of the reporters outside, but inside it had already vanished. All that remained was the echo of Amara's calm and the trembling realization that the hierarchy had collapsed in real time. Julia finally lowered her phone and whispered, "What now?" Amara turned toward the grand staircase, her silhouette outlined in gold light. "Now," she said, "we rebuild this foundation the right way, on truth, not pedigree." Then she looked back, once her final words carrying through the marble hall. "Remember this night. The cost of silence is always paid in public." And with that, she walked toward the open doors, not escorted out, but escorted forward. Outside, the city pulsed with sirens, camera flashes, and the metallic hum of attention. By midnight, every news outlet had the footage. "Billionaire hits Black CEO at charity gala." The headline traveled faster than the wind could carry shame. Inside her car, Amara Lewis sat alone in the back seat, the gala's golden noise still clinging to her skin. Her assistant's voice came through the speaker. "The video hit 2 million views in an hour. Board members are calling non-stop." Amara looked out the window at the reflection of herself in the passing glass towers. "They should be calling to listen," she said, "not to control the narrative." Downtown lights blurred like distant flashbacks. At 16, she had been escorted out of a country club for standing in the wrong doorway. At 22, a banker refused her loan with the same sentence Eleanor Sharp had used tonight: "You people never know your place." Each memory pressed against her ribs like old bruises that never fully healed. She had built her empire on the energy those wounds created. The car stopped at a red light. Across the intersection, a billboard flickered: Luma Global, her company, her own name glowing against the dark. Funny, she thought. The world would trust her to build cities, but still doubt her right to walk through one. Her assistant broke the silence again. Social feeds are divided. Half the comments call it inspiring, half call it staged. Amara smiled faintly. Then we did something right. The truth always sounds scripted to people who never lived it. Back at the museum, Julia Tran stood on the steps, still clutching her phone. The video she'd posted had gone viral, but she hadn't expected the weight of it. Reporters were asking for interviews. She just said, "I don't need to explain what everyone saw." Inside, staff whispered about resignations, lawsuits, and press statements. But the thing no one could stop talking about was how calm Amara had been, how she never raised her voice, never broke her rhythm, never flinched. A guest told a journalist, it wasn't anger, it was authority finally being visible. Another replied, she didn't take control. She revealed she'd always had it. Meanwhile, in her car, Amara closed her eyes. Her phone buzzed again, messages, calls, chaos, but she ignored them. All she could hear was the violin from earlier echoing in memory, soft but unbroken. She whispered to herself, "Let them talk. Let them spin. The truth doesn't need to trend. It just needs to stay." At that same moment, a young girl in Detroit watched the viral clip on her cracked phone screen. She saw Amara's stillness, the slap, the silence that followed, and whispered, "That's who I want to be." And across the country, millions were saying the same. The night had begun with humiliation, but it wouldn't stay that way. It had turned into something larger, the moment silence stopped being mistaken for weakness and started sounding like power. By dawn, the video had already rewritten its own mythology. News anchors replayed it frame by frame, analyzing tone, posture, race, wealth, and power like evidence from a trial. The whole world was suddenly qualified to judge. Clips spread across timelines, the slap, the silence, the reveal. But what people couldn't stop watching wasn't the violence, it was the stillness that followed. Amara Lewis had turned calm into a weapon. In a studio somewhere in New York, a morning host asked her co-anchor, "Do you think it was staged?" The other replied, "If it was, it's the most dignified performance I've ever seen." On talk shows, panelists debated everything from reverse racism to grace under fire. But underneath the noise, something deeper was happening. For once, millions of people were listening to a black woman without interruption. At Luma Global headquarters, the executive floor buzzed like a courtroom. The boardroom screens showed the video muted, looping. Her team waited for orders that hadn't come. Finally, Amara entered, no entourage, no dramatics, just focus. Every head turned, every voice died. She walked to the table, placed her phone down, and said, "Before we talk PR, let's talk principle. Who here would have stood up if they didn't know who I was?" No one spoke. The silence was heavier than any apology could be. "Exactly," Amara said. "We don't fix image, we fix integrity. This company doesn't build glass towers to hide from reflection." Her communications director tried to interject. "We could spin this position you," as Amara raised a hand, gentle but final. "We're not spinning justice. We're amplifying it." She turned to Julia Tran, who had been flown in overnight. "You filmed what you saw. You told the truth. You're hired, Director of Public Ethics." Julia blinked. "Ma'am, I'm not qualified." "You are," Amara said. "You recognized wrong when others stayed quiet. That's the only qualification that matters." A ripple went through the room. The power structure had shifted quietly but completely. Outside reporters swarmed the entrance, their microphones hungry for sound bites. One shouted, "Miss Lewis, how do you feel about Eleanor Sharp's apology video?" Amara paused just long enough to look directly into the camera lens. "Apologies are currency for those who can afford regret," she said. "I prefer restitution." By noon, that line had become its own headline. Clipped, captioned, and quoted on every feed. Number restitution trended across 3 continents. But Amara didn't stay online to watch it spread. She returned to her office overlooking the skyline, drew the blinds halfway, and whispered the same words that started her empire years ago. "Build so quietly that arrogance mistakes you for absence." She smiled, faint but real, because this time the world was finally learning that silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. By the second day, Eleanor Sharp was trending for all the wrong reasons. Clips of her slap had been slowed down, remixed, dissected by every journalist and armchair philosopher online. She had released an apology video at 3 a.m., shot in her penthouse tears, staged voice trembling. "I let emotion cloud my judgment," she said to the camera. But the world wasn't buying redemption from someone who had treated dignity like an accessory. The top comment read, "You didn't lose your temper, you revealed it." Meanwhile, Amara Lewis hadn't spoken publicly since the night of the gala, and that silence only made her louder. Inside Luma Global's glass tower, her executive team prepared a press statement, but Amara stopped them. "No statements," she said. "Just action." She tapped her tablet, projecting a contract onto the conference wall. The title read, "The Lewis Equity Initiative, Restoring Access and Representation in Philanthropy." Every company associated with Eleanor's foundation was listed. Every one of them was about to lose funding unless they rebuilt their boards with inclusion at the core. Her CFO blinked. "This move will shake half the donor network." Amara met his eyes. "Then it's already working." Word spread fast. By noon, journalists were calling it the Gala Aftershock. The same halls that once echoed with mockery were now flooded with inquiries about ethical partnerships. Julia Tran stood in the corner taking notes. She looked nervous. Amara noticed. "You have something to say, Julia." Julia hesitated. "It's just, people online are turning this into a race war." "You didn't mean it that way, did you?" Amara's gaze softened but stayed firm. "I didn't start a war. I ended an illusion." She paused, then added, "The goal isn't revenge, it's reconstruction." Outside the building, protesters gathered, some holding justice for Amara signs, others demanding Eleanor's resignation from city boards. Reporters shouted questions at anyone leaving Luma HQ. It wasn't chaos, it was awakening. That evening, Amara finally broke her silence. She stepped onto the small podium in the lobby, no teleprompter, no speech, just truth. "I was hit because someone saw my presence as a problem," she began. What she didn't know was that my presence built the floor she stood on. Her voice was steady, the kind that didn't rise to command attention, it earned it. "You can't humiliate what refuses to bow," she said. "And you can't erase what built your foundation." Phones recorded every word. But unlike Eleanor's apology, there were no edits, no cuts, no filters, just reality. When she finished, she didn't ask for applause. She simply said, "If you want change, invest in it," and walked off stage. The next morning, donations to the Lewis Initiative broke every record in the foundation's history. Not because people pitied her, but because for once they believed her. By the end of the week, the Horizon Arts Foundation, the same institution that once humiliated her, had become something unrecognizable. The walls still stood, but the culture inside them had shifted like tectonic plates. Amara Lewis didn't arrive with cameras or security. She walked through the same glass doors that Eleanor Sharp had tried to shut in her face 7 nights ago. This time, the staff stood waiting, not in fear, but in respect. The front desk attendant, a young black woman named Rochelle, greeted her nervously. "Miss Lewis, welcome back." Amara smiled gently. "Let's make that welcome mean something this time." She moved through the lobby where it all began. The marble still gleamed, but the echoes had changed. There was no more hush of hierarchy, no more brittle laughter. Only voices, honest, unafraid, alive. In the main hall, construction crews were removing Eleanor's name from the donor wall. Letter by letter, the old power structure peeled away. Amara watched quietly as the final P dropped into a worker's hand. "Keep the marble," she said, "but carve new names into it, the ones who were never invited here before." Julia Tran stood nearby with a clipboard recording everything. She looked both proud and overwhelmed. "Miss Lewis," she asked softly, "what do we call this new version of the foundation?" Amara turned to the empty wall and said, "The Horizon Collective." Because real art and progress don't belong to one face, one color, or one wallet. The workers nodded, some smiling through tears. Later that afternoon, Amara met with the remaining board members in the same conference room where Eleanor used to preside. The mood was careful, contrite. One of them, a gray-haired man in a blue tie, finally spoke. "We've been reevaluating our approach to diversity." Amara raised an eyebrow. "That word's overused. Try humanity instead." The man nodded quickly. "Understood." She placed a folder on the table. "Inside is a proposal. You'll find your salaries adjusted to match the staff you once ignored. If that's a problem, this meeting is your resignation." No one moved. No one objected. The message was clear. Power had found new definitions. Afterward, Amara stepped out onto the museum balcony overlooking the city. A light drizzle began to fall, soft as memory. She remembered the girl she'd been at 16, the one escorted out of a lobby because she didn't belong. That girl had built an empire so she'd never have to ask permission again. Julia joined her quietly. "People are calling you the face of justice now." Amara shook her head. "Justice doesn't have a face. That's what makes it fair." Below them, the city buzzed with traffic cameras, conversations. But for the first time, it didn't feel like noise. It felt like movement. Amara took a deep breath, eyes on the skyline she'd helped rebuild. "This isn't the end of a story," she said softly. "It's the end of pretending one voice isn't enough to start one." Night settled over the city like a verdict finally read aloud. The Horizon Collective's relaunch gala was only a week away, but this time, it wasn't about luxury, it was about legacy. The invitations were digital, open, and free. The headline read, "No dress code, just courage." Amara Lewis sat alone in her office, the skyline flickering in her glass walls. Across the room, the old donor portrait of Eleanor Sharp still leaned against the wall, face turned toward the floor. Amara hadn't removed it yet. She wanted to remember what arrogance looked like before it broke. Her assistant entered quietly. "Miss Lewis, CNN, wants an interview. They're offering prime time." Amara shook her head. "No more interviews. The story isn't mine anymore, it's everyone's." She stood, adjusting the cuff of her blazer, as calm and deliberate as always. "Tell them to interview the staff who stayed," she said. "The ones who kept this place alive when no one saw them." The assistant hesitated. "You sure the world still wants your voice?" Amara smiled faintly. "Then they'll have to learn to hear it in other people." Downstairs, the renovation crews were putting up the final sign. Horizon Collective, founded on dignity. Built by all. Julia Tran stood among them, overseeing the last details. She wore a simple gray suit, the kind of uniform that didn't demand attention but commanded it anyway. When Amara arrived, Julia turned, grinning. "It's ready." Amara nodded. "So are you." They walked together through the transformed hall. No velvet ropes, no guards, no assigned tables. The walls were lined with portraits of artists, scientists, and entrepreneurs of color stories once erased, now illuminated. The same marble that had echoed with insult now reflected something wholly recognition. A reporter waiting near the entrance called out, "Miss Lewis, any final words for tomorrow's launch?" Amara stopped, considered, then said simply, "Power isn't who speaks the loudest. It's who stays standing when the noise fades." She walked past him without looking back. That night, social feeds lit up again, this time with a different kind of video. Clips of the new space, the staff smiling, the quote carved into the entryway. The comment section overflowed, not with outrage, but gratitude. I saw myself in her story. She didn't just clap back, she built back. At 2 a.m., Amara scrolled through the messages alone in her penthouse. One caught her eye, a voice note from a girl named Nia in Detroit. "I watched your video 100 times. I didn't know silence could sound like victory. Thank you." Amara listened twice, then closed her phone. The city outside hummed alive, unashamed. She whispered to the night, "That's the sound of change breathing." And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to rest. Because the story no longer needed her protection, it was already rewriting itself in a million unseen hands. The morning of the relaunch arrived beneath a clean sky, a kind of peace the city hadn't earned yet but needed. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the museum, touching every surface that once felt cold. There were no velvet ropes this time, no VIP entrance. Just people, students, workers, families walking freely through doors that had once guarded them. Inside, the air smelled of new paint and second chances. Cameras lined the back wall, waiting for a spectacle. What they found instead was sincerity. Amara Lewis walked through the center aisle slowly, her black suit tailored like armor, but her face softer than anyone had ever seen it. Every step echoed like punctuation at the end of an old sentence. Julia Tran, now wearing her press badge that read Director of Public Ethics, stood at the podium. Her hands shook for the first two words, then steadied. "Welcome to the Horizon Collective, where belonging is not granted. It's recognized." Applause. Real, full human. Then came Amara. She didn't take the podium. She stood beside it in the same spot where Eleanor Sharp once slapped her. No spotlight, no music, just the memory of marble and justice. "When I walked through these doors last time," she began, "someone decided I didn't belong. They were wrong, but not alone. They were the mirror of a system that rewards silence and punishes difference." The crowd listened, not scrolling, not recording, just present. "Tonight isn't about me," Amara continued. "It's about every person who has been told no by someone who thought they were the gate." She turned slightly toward the new donor wall, where dozens of names now glowed under warm light: janitors, interns, local artists, single mothers, educators, real people, real contributors. "These are the new founders," she said. "Not the ones who buy space, but the ones who make it worth standing in." A tear slipped down Julia's cheek. In the back row, a janitor in uniform wiped his hands and started clapping. One by one, the hall followed until the sound filled every corner like forgiveness made tangible. Reporters whispered to each other. She didn't come to reclaim power, she came to redistribute it. Amara waited for the applause to fade before finishing her voice. Now almost a whisper, the most radical thing you can do with power is to return it to the people who were never supposed to have it. Outside, the crowd waiting in the street joined in their cheers, echoing through the open doors. The sound rolled through the avenue, a chorus of vindication, not vengeance. For a fleeting second, Amara closed her eyes. The marble beneath her feet no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like ground reclaimed. And in that silence that followed applause, she knew she'd done more than restore her dignity. She had renamed what it meant to lead. That night, the city glowed differently. Not brighter, truer. From every window overlooking the Horizon Collective, you could see people standing outside, phones raised not to record scandal but celebration. No one was shouting. No one needed to. Amara Lewis stood on the rooftop terrace, the skyline bending beneath her like a living testimony. The air was cool, the kind that carried sound, slowly letting words mean what they were supposed to. Julia joined her 2 glasses of water in hand. No champagne, she teased. Amara smiled. Too loud. Water remembers. Below them, the new mural unveiled at sunset stretched across the museum's outer wall, a painting of open doors with one line beneath it. We don't enter to prove we belong. We enter because we built the door. Reporters had begged for a closing statement. Amara had declined them all. But standing here above the crowd with the city humming like a choir of second chances, she finally spoke not to the cameras but to the night. They called it a slap, she said quietly. But it was really a mirror. And mirrors don't hurt people, they show them who they've been avoiding. Julia stood beside her in silence. For a long moment, the 2 women just watched the people below, artists setting up canvases on the steps, children dancing, security guards smiling at strangers. A city mid-transformation. Amara's phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Eleanor Sharp, I hope someday you'll forgive me. Amara read it twice, then typed 1 sentence in reply. Forgiveness is not mine to give. It's yours to learn. Then she set the phone down and never looked at it again. A breeze moved through the terrace. The sound of music floated up from the plaza, not orchestral, not formal, just a saxophonist playing slow blues. The kind of song that didn't need lyrics because everyone already knew the words. Julia whispered. You really think one night can change a city? Amara turned to her. Her eyes calm, her voice almost tender. No, but one act of dignity can remind it how. She looked back at the horizon, the same skyline that once measured wealth, now measuring change. The camera drones circling above caught her silhouette against the gold-lit glass. For a heartbeat, the world was quiet again. No noise, no argument, just the echo of what justice sounds like when it doesn't need permission. Amara's last words of the night came like a vow, soft but certain. I don't need to prove anything anymore. I don't need the clip or the camera, because I am the result they were all waiting to see. And as the crowd below began to cheer, the woman who had once been struck down in that same hall simply stood tall, silent, steady, and unforgettable, while the city around her finally began to rise with her.